Welcome back to Oxfordshire for our final session at BOF Voices 2023. That was the absolute perfect way to set the mood for our session called Live Your Best Life. Born and raised in Lagos, Nigeria, that was brothers Victory and Marvel Ebinum. I recently discovered them on Instagram on a day when I wasn't feeling so good. And seeing them move that way made me feel contemplative and reflective instead of sad. And we had a quick Zoom call maybe last week. Yeah. And I heard a little bit about your story. So tell me, how did you start doing what you do?
I feel like for us, it's always been like growing up in Lagos, Nigeria, and like the experiences in Lagos, like having the Afro community in Lagos. For us, we've always like wanted to share stories and inspire people because of how we grew up in Lagos, Nigeria. And we've always felt like, because we always say we are inspired by our life experiences. So dancing, doing this, because we don't actually call it dance. We actually refer to ourselves as artistic communicators, because for us, it's all about like communicating. So it's not something that is actually planned. I don't know what I just did. I just like.
So that was completely on the spot.
Yeah. So it's not like if you just play music for me now and tell me, okay, dance, I wouldn't know what to do. Like, so I have to like be in a space, and I feel like that's what helped us like being able to like be focused in a place in Nigeria, like dancing like this and communicating ourselves. It helps us stay like grounded and like so focused on what we want to say and share our story. So that really helped us in our journey. And I feel like we've always been doing this forever. I don't know when I haven't actually been moving.
Yeah, I can't tell you like the moment it started. Like I really cannot remember, honestly.
But one of you started first.
Yes.
Who was that again?
Yeah, me.
Yeah.
I would say, yeah, I started dancing first. But just like I said before, I don't call it this dance.
Yeah.
So yeah, I started dancing. We used to dance a lot together.
Yeah.
Then, but later, then we were not actually speaking anything. We were not actually saying anything to dance.
Yeah.
We were just like dancing and to entertain people, like enjoy ourselves.
And now you move that way, why?
To share, basically, to just inspire people, basically.
Yeah. I feel like we also wanted to inspire ourselves as well.
Yeah.
It got to a point whereby we felt like we need to do something more meaningful.
Yeah.
And we felt like it's time to like say something, to give something, because for us, this living life, like I don't just always want to be taking things. Like I want to like share and give and help people and inspire and change minds. And doing this, when we started moving this way, whenever we moved, we always felt connected.
Yeah.
We always felt there was something special. And whenever we danced, whenever we moved in front of people, they always also felt something. We felt like, oh, we can actually change lives with doing this. And I think that's the most important thing for us, just like sharing our story through this and giving out to people. Yeah.
Well, I'm so grateful that on very short notice, you came to share that moment with us.
Thank you so much.
It's a beautiful way to start. Thank you to the Ebinum brothers. Yes, we can fill the seats in the front now. Thank you, Shiza. Misan Harriman is a British photographer and activist whose powerful black and white photos document major historical moments as well as subtle social dynamics. From championing civil rights through his photos of the Black Lives Matter movement to immortalizing some of the world's most famous faces, Misan has photographed it all. Please welcome Misan Harriman to the Voices stage.
Hey. So, there he is. I don't have many pictures of me as a little person. That was shortly before I was sent to boarding school at a ridiculously young age from Nigeria to England. But my childhood was what I can only really describe as moment after moment of sustained trauma. And I found safety and solace in the notes of song, in poetry, in pictures, and in film. And I became obsessed with it. I was a kid that would go with my housemaster to pick whatever VHS we could watch. And as I got older, I started discovering pictures that made me rewire who I thought I should be. This image was taken by Moneta Sleet Jr., the first black man to win the Pulitzer for photography. This is a funeral of Martin Luther King, and it's an image of Coretta Scott King and her baby girl, Bernice. Moneta was almost not allowed to go in. Can you imagine on the funeral of Martin Luther King, no black photographers were invited? Coretta had to insist Moneta got in. And thank God he did, because somehow he managed to show the grace of this woman on an unimaginable day. And this is the image that made me realize that pictures can be a lot more than birthday snaps or holiday. Years later, my wife bought me a camera. She realized that my dyslexia and neurodiverse mind meant that I've been ashamed for all my adult life at how my mind works. And I met a woman that fell in love with all the parts of myself that I was ashamed of. And she said, instead of just being an obsessive fan, maybe you have a point of view. And I took a whole bunch of crap images until we got pregnant. My firstborn was premature, and I was petrified to be the custodian of something so perfectly precious. And I hid behind the viewfinder. And as I took picture after picture, the quality increased. And my daughter taught me not just how to be a father, but how to love myself. A year later, 2 years later, 2020, COVID came, George Floyd was killed, and I had run out of tears. I said to my wife, I don't know what to do, and she said once again, look to the camera. And I took the camera and I went to London not knowing if I would see 5 people or 5,000 people. And I was lucky to be able to capture what I believe is the greatest civil rights movement in our lifetime. This was taken at Guildford University. And we know the term Black Lives Matter, but what I love about this image is it goes further. I believe, and I hope you do, that we are worthy, beloved, and needed. I could try and take this image 1,000,000 times and it will never happen. This is Parliament Square, and I managed to be there to shoot an image of a black man with his fists in the air, with a jacket of one of the greatest hip-hop albums by Public Enemy of all time, Fear of a Black Planet, standing below Madiba. I believe sometimes images come to you. This is the image that broke me. I was looking at the selects, and I saw this boy who's in a wheelchair and has his own challenges, I'm sure of that, with his mother or carer, tears in their eyes, stood in this wave of solidarity. And I realized that I had captured what hope is, and the very best of this United Kingdom. This image is interesting because I saw the eyes, and I just focused straight in on the eyes because I knew those eyes. They were hope that I sadly have to waltz with pain. I could relate to those eyes, and that's all I thought of. And then I looked at my selects, and I realized that I'd captured something extraordinary, because behind that man was a sign that I didn't even see, of which you can only see 2 lines saying, "I am not a moment. Can you see us now?" When you're walking in protest with 20, 50, 100,000 people, once in a while you see things you just double take. And I remember being really down, really low, saying, I can't keep shooting my own trauma. And I was like, did I just see something celestial? And I looked, and I saw Juno. And I walked up and to her father, Roger, and I said, are you cool with this? And he's like, we are here to bear witness. And there's something about this image that doesn't just move me that the parents were comfortable doing this, but also the eyes of this child always remind me of the work that I need to do. If we are all lucky enough to make it into adulthood, our work has to be to carve out a world so they have a fighting chance. The gay and trans community are deeply important to me. Marginalized within another marginalized community, I use my lens to try and be their sword and shield. This could be Brooklyn in the 60s. That is the Houses of Parliament behind. And they know me, and they saw me kind of walking home, and just like that, they were ready. No questions were asked. And for me, all of these beautiful souls have been through hell just to be who they are. And I refuse to accept that that should be the status quo. And I hope my images help us learn to understand people that have a different lived experience. Off the back of all these images, I get a phone call from Vogue saying that Edward Enninful's seen the images, and Edward did something remarkable. He decided to give a then unknown photographer the September issue. And, I took this image, and it obviously changed my life. It made me the first black man not to shoot any cover, but September issue and any cover. And it took 104 years to get there. Off the back of that, lots of offers came in, and I've had this incredible journey shooting all of the icons that I have looked up to. I was lucky enough to shoot Lewis and interview him for GQ Man of the Year. I was lucky enough to have a shoot with Angelina Jolie where, when she arrived, everyone's like, oh, do you think we can go on the roof? I'm like, shall I ask her? And I asked her, and she's like, of course. On a grey day, as only Angie can do, she climbs on the roof, and the clouds part, and this golden glow to shine upon her. Very happy, and I'm sure Valentino was pretty happy too. All whilst this is happening, I then get a phone call in my kitchen from a headhunter saying, we're looking for the new chairman of Europe's largest cultural institution. And I laughed. I actually laughed at him because I'm not Lord and Lady so-and-so. I dropped out of uni, I have shitty A-levels. And generally, I'm like, why are you calling me? Get off the phone. And my wife, once again, goes, you've always loved that place, and it's a physical embodiment of everything you fight for. So I was like, fine, let's go. And 170 people later, I'm somehow chosen to be the chair of 11 acres of inclusive culture, which is the South Bank Centre. A great, great honor. My lens is there for truth. And as many of you in this room know, I'm very old friends with the Duchess, Meghan, and I'm just honored for them to ask me to capture so many of the most important moments of their lives. And my lens is really, really observational, and what you see is who they are. But regardless of how famous whoever I photograph, when communities are hurting, I run toward them. So when Chris Kaba was killed by a Met police officer, I went to see the family and capture their unfiltered pain. And because I don't work for Reuters or Getty, many of these communities know that if I shoot them, there's no misrepresentation. I do right by their pain, and their need for justice. And during all this, I've been volunteering for years with Save the Children, and they came to me to ask if I can be an ambassador. And with my childhood, with having 2 daughters, I believe children are as close to the celestial as we will ever get to. And I refuse to look away from children being harmed, whether they are being taken hostage, whether they are being bombed. We cannot have a society where we have to whisper or be silent about our most precious being harmed. And also for the fashion industry, that includes you. You cannot have collective amnesia and apathy when things that are abhorrent happens, like Balenciaga. We have to be better than that. The humans that I shot in Somaliland are people who are suffering because of climate change, something most of us are more responsible for than anyone in Somaliland. And I came back with amazing stories, thinking, oh my God, this is going to be all over the news, and it was tumbleweeds. I couldn't get anyone to talk about the biggest hunger crisis that's happened in a generation, the potential of losing 1.6 million children under the age of 5 that is utterly preventable. Again, we have to do better. And then the women of Iran were failed once again. And I'm showing you these images because the great thing about the still image is it doesn't shout at you. You can decode it in your own voice. Outside the US Embassy, I saw this lady, and I will forever have to live with the sound that came out of her mouth. The solidarity of humanity is what we do when we know we cannot look away. And coming up to the current news cycle with a tragedy in the Middle East, I marched with 50 charities, including those I represent, Save the Children, and then Oxfam, Christian Aid, many others, to 10 Downing Street to demand a ceasefire so we can get hostages out and so we can protect children from being hurt furthermore. What I would say to you now is please remember that we must have empathy and intentionality in how we move in our lives, both privately and professionally. The next stage of my journey is film. And I was very lucky to have the opportunity to partner with Netflix. And I made something that is really there to accompany you all in the mental health crisis I believe we're all going through. I am not okay right now. And I know that that is okay. And this film is a short film that will help you find a way to build yourself back up brick by brick. I will finish with 2 quotes. The first one is by C.S. Lewis. I sat with my anger until she told me her real name was grief. I'll say that again. I sat with my anger until she told me her real name was grief. And the final quote is by the peerless Rumi. Raise your words, not your voice, for it is rain that grows. Raise your words, not your voice. It is rain that grows flowers, not thunder. Before you post anything, before you say anything, reread this. I read this every morning, and it just reminds me just to steady our sails. And if we steady our sails, I think there's a fighting chance that we may be able to look toward the horizon together. Thank you.
It's always special to have someone I can call a friend on the BOF Voices stage. And our next conversation will feature two friends who are also friends with each other. Born in Karachi, Sharmeen Obaid Chinoy is a two-time Academy Award-winning filmmaker, journalist, and activist. Known for eye-opening films that center on human rights and women's issues, she brings unheard voices to the forefront, inspiring meaningful conversations and advocating for positive transformation. Let's have a look.
Somebody has been able to amplify my voice, and now it is my turn to amplify the voice of countless people who are creating change.
Sharmeen Obaid Chinoy is one of the most fantastic filmmakers.
She's a Pakistani director, journalist, and activist.
Really one of our great cultural leaders in the world of film and TV and media.
Sharmeen's remarkable career has been devoted to spotlighting ignored human stories and holding those in power to account.
A new Disney Plus series features the first Muslim superhero in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and is now one of the highest rated shows of its kind.
When Miss Marvel came around, I thought about what she would mean to millions of people around the world who would see a reflection of themselves in her.
Star Wars is returning, and the film will be directed by Sharmeen Obaid Chinoy, winner of 2 Academy Awards for documentary shorts.
She's the first Pakistani to win an Oscar.
The Pakistani Prime Minister has said that he will change the law on honor killing after watching this film. That is the power of film.
So this is where it gets fun. I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I was in Diane von Furstenberg's office in New York with pictures of Diane all over the walls. It's so surreal. And she told me someone was making a documentary about her life. And I said, who's making the documentary? And she said, Sharmeen Obaid Chinoy. And I said, wow, I know Sharmeen. And so Sharmeen's been working on this documentary for the last 1.5 years or so. And so to have this conversation with Sharmeen about her career, we're going to turn the tables because Sharmeen's been asking all the questions up until now. And for anyone who knows Diane von Furstenberg, when she gets the mic, you never know what's going to happen. So here's Diane von Furstenberg and Sharmeen Obaid Chinoy to speak on the power of film as a tool for empathy and change.
Thank you. You stole all my words. I have nothing else to say. But can we, before we start, can we just applaud to Imran for a wonderful, soulful day? Yeah. So, I do like to talk about myself. My family knows it and whatever. But for the last 2 years, Sharmeen has been interviewing me. And a few months ago, I said to her, enough, I need to interview you now. And so this is why we are here today. So, Sharmeen and I are very close. We've become codependent. We boost each other. We protect each other. We do everything for each other. That is, of course, because I have not seen the documentary yet. Anyway, so I have so much admiration and respect and everything for Sharmeen. And so I believe in words. So this morning I wrote down these words that symbolizes this incredible woman. Strength, courage, compassion, adventure. Oh, compassion again. I wrote it twice. And of course, storytelling. But most of all, is inspiration, and she gets her inspiration by provocation with purpose. She provokes in order to have a purpose. And it seems like that's the theme of today. So, Charmaine, tell us first about the little girl growing up in Pakistan.
I was a difficult child. I was the one who always asked the questions no one wanted to answer. So I'm the eldest of 5 children. My father was persevering. Well, now 6 children, but 5 of them girls. So persevering for a son. And I remember, because I'm the eldest, my earliest memory of being a difficult child is when I was 10 years old and I was going to school in the morning, and the car had stopped at a traffic light, and there was a young girl who was the same age as me, but while I was wearing a uniform, she had her hand stretched out and she was begging. And that made me go home and ask my mother, why is it that I can go to school and she can't? And my mother, because she was raising so many children, she said, you keep asking these difficult questions, one day you should just put them out to the world in some way. And so I started writing for newspapers in Pakistan when I was 14 years old. That was my first published sort of newspaper article. By the time I was 17, I was going undercover to do cover stories for the biggest English language newspaper in Pakistan called The Dawn. And one story in particular defines the trajectory of my life and the person that I am today, which is when I was 17 years old, I went undercover to do a story about a group of young boys who had access to ammunition and who were kidnapping other young boys, shaving their head, bullying them, and sort of, if there was a party in the neighborhood, they would crash the party, terrorize the other kids. But these kids belonged to some wealthy, connected political families. And I wrote about them. I named and shamed them. And the article came out on the morning of the Muslim holiday Eid. And if anyone knows what Eid is like in Pakistan, everything is shut. So that morning, it comes out. My father's going off to say his prayers. He comes back, and we lived in a double-story house. And my the front door opens almost about 5 minutes after he leaves. So it's too soon for him to have said his prayers. And he says, Charmaine, and sort of the name is bellowing through the house, and my mother just gives me a look that says, oh, I have no idea what you've done, but you are handling this. and my father was standing at the bottom of the stairs, and he just looked up at me, and he's like, what have you done? And I honestly had no idea what he was specifically referring to. And so I said, I don't know. And he's like, why is your name spray painted across our gate, our neighborhood, and the entire area with such profanities? People had written, Charmaine is a whore, Charmaine is a bitch. All kinds of things were sort of spray painted. And coming from a conservative Muslim country, that is so unacceptable in so many ways. And it clicked to me that it was the young men that I had written about that day. And they knew that it was Eid, and everybody would be leaving the homes to go visiting, so everyone would see it. So it was a way to shame me and my family and shame me into silence. And my father was a strict man, but strict because he had 5 girls. But he said something to me that day, which is, he stood there and he said, if you tell the truth, I will stand with you, and so will the world. And for a 17-year-old girl to have that said, and then he got a hold of a bunch of friends and they whitewashed the walls. And that is, I always knew in my life that someone would have my back, because my father had my back when I was 17. And that emboldened me to go out into the world and tell the stories that I have told. And I found that I do provoke. I do hold up a mirror to society. Some people think that I'm a hero. Some people think I'm a villain, because I choose to continue to do that. In my home country of Pakistan and around the world, wherever I make films, I do it to name and shame people so that we as a collective humanity can understand that we can do better than we are. And I remember the first time I realized that film can make a change is, just so everyone knows, I've never studied film. I studied economics and political science, and I'm an accidental filmmaker. And throughout my career, I've learned from the best, watched them, and then sort of taken in things and just followed my heart and followed my story and whatever has sort of pulled me. The first time I realized that film can make a difference is when I was, in 2005, I was in the Philippines and I was making a film about access to contraceptives for poor women. Philippines is a Catholic country. They don't give access to contraceptives to women. And the film I created was used by a local nonprofit to champion the government to change the way they approached giving contraceptives to women. And I was like, oh, I'm not just a filmmaker. I can actually create change. And that was the first time I realized that.
Change laws.
Change laws. And in my own home country of Pakistan, I have impacted 2 major laws that have changed because of the films that I've done. One on honor killing and one on acid violence against women, where a coercive substance is thrown on the face of women. And more recently, my co-director Trish and I worked with LeBron James to create a film about the NCAA and about how Black athletes who come from some of the poor neighborhoods cannot profit over their likeness and are basically spat out by the system. We created a film called Student Athlete, took it to Capitol Hill to lobby them to change laws. And I'm happy to report that our film played a small role in making sure that athletes of the NCAA can profit off their likeness now.
I mean, I have nothing to say. All I could say is that 3 weeks ago, I saw a film of Sharmeen that I had never seen, The Children of the Taliban. And it is a movie she did in a school of these very, very small kids who were raised to become suicide bombers. And I mean, please watch this movie. It's just incredible. So the movie is incredible, but she looks like, I don't know, Silvana Mangano. I mean, it's beautiful. How old were you when you did it?
25, I think.
I mean, so watch The Children of the Taliban. It's so incredible. And she looks like this big, huge Italian movie star.
That was a film that taught me so much about how we see the world as black and white, but the world is gray, and so much of it is gray. And I went into the school with all these preconceived notions about what it means. Why would a young man decide to take the lives of other people? What are the steps that lead him to think that it is okay to do so? And after spending time and watching the way the young men are brainwashed, the isolation, the steady feed of hate that is fed into them, the global politics that do play a role in how they perceived their own role in that area, and how they feel frustrated that they have nothing but their bodies to create some form of change, and their lives on earth are so terrible, and they're fed this dream that their hereafter is this beautiful place. And I went in there thinking that, all of these people that I would see would be terrorists, but what I walked away thinking was any one of us, if we were put in those circumstances and made to live those lives and fed that steady diet of hate, that we would all, in some way, unfortunately choose not to judge them, but to really understand who they are. And if you have walked in the shoes of other people, you can realize that any one of us, when faced with those odds, who knows what we would do. And I think that my journey as a filmmaker has always been about making sure that people realize what it feels like to walk in the shoes of other people. Because one thing that defines my filmmaking career is empathy. It is so important, I think, as a world today, we see each other as the other, but we're really not the other. It's so interesting because I'm a Muslim, and when people see me, very often they don't see a Muslim woman, because they're in that construct of a Muslim woman. I do not fit that construct at all. And so shattering stereotypes and empathy and holding up a mirror to society is so very important. But going on to the fun side of what I have been doing recently is when COVID hit, Diane's, I got a call about Diane's film, and I was like, Diane, I would love to do this film.
No. First, the idea is that we wanted to do a documentary together about the women of the Vital Voices. That was the idea.
Yeah, that was the idea. And out of that idea came Diane's life. But as we were working on... as one does. As we were working on Diane's life and working onto the thing, I think as a filmmaker, the greatest thing that can happen to you is that you can start in one place and end up in one place. So while I've been working on the documentary film and spending time and sort of taking documentary films from, on the front lines of wars, which is what I was doing to Diane's life, and in the middle, taking that ethos and thinking about things like Miss Marvel, which is, again, opening up the way we see superheroes. A brown Muslim woman can be a superhero. And creating those kind of characters into mainstream media for young girls around the world who see themselves as others in high schools, in places where they're not proud of their culture, the language, the food. Suddenly Miss Marvel gives them an identity. And it's so important for us today to have that kind of identity. And hopefully that's what we're taking straight into a galaxy far, far away. And excited to work on a Star Wars that I think it's about time in 2023 to have a female actually direct Star Wars.
This happened while we were shooting.
Yeah.
She got Star Wars at that time.
Yeah. Yeah, it was in the middle of. But
the good part is that, because I keep on saying, why this movie? And she said, because you open doors. And she opened doors, right? The point is that any woman that has any success in any way can open the doors for other women. So that's the first thing we had in common. But then this happened, and now I forgot what I was going to say.
No, but as somebody who comes from a world where there are very few female filmmakers, and to be able to go on that trajectory, there are three things that I've always lived by. I've never taken no for an answer. If someone tells me no, I don't see that. If a door is closed for me, I think I need to kick it open. As a woman, I need to kick open the doors that have previously been closed for me. And the third is, I want to leave the door open for any other woman that wants to walk through it. And I think that that's so important to be able to do. And that has been your life. You have been opening doors for women. Hopefully, I will leave that legacy, and that will continue, because in 2023, there can be no other thing that we can do to ensure that there is parity for women.
So she interviewed a lot of people for my documentary, a lot of people of all types. And almost every time she interviewed people, she said, by interviewing these people about you, I'm learning so much about my life now. And that made me feel very good, because I like to be needed.
Well, I'll tell you something. All the working women in this room who have children and who travel a lot will tell you that it's hard for us, as we always think about, do we really want to walk up through that door and climb that step higher? Does that mean less time with our kids? Does that mean, and sometimes all the time that I've spent with Diane, she said, never have regrets. Don't have regrets.
And no guilt.
And no guilt. And so I'm taking that mantra of no guilt and no regrets into where I am going today. And one of the things that I feel like I've been hoping to do and I've been able to do is, when I started as a filmmaker in Pakistan, everyone said to me it wasn't possible. You could not be a filmmaker in Pakistan, could certainly not be a filmmaker in Pakistan and win 2 Academy Awards and Emmys, well, and then go on to direct Star Wars. I've set up this organization in Pakistan that is funding and mentoring the next generation of storytellers and truth seekers in Pakistan. In the last 2 years, we funded 15 films by filmmakers. These filmmakers have gone on to show these films around the world and win awards around the world. Long after I am gone, they will carry the mantle forward. And so the idea is, how do I build an ecosystem in my home country of Pakistan while I continue to live and work around the world. And so Pataha means firecrackers. And that's the name of the organization. It's so that we have all of these firecracker women in Pakistan who will continue to make films. And so we went from 15 films. This year, we're going to be funding another 15. And so hopefully every year that number will continue to grow. And as the number grows, there'll be more and more people who will join the ranks. And I think it's the one thing that I will say is what my father said to me when I was 17.
True to yourself.
Be true to yourself. If you speak the truth, I will stand with you. And
that's wonderful.
Every single young woman who speaks the truth in my home country of Pakistan and around the world, wherever I work, those are the women whose voices I hope to continue to amplify. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I will be back later to talk about myself.
Oh my God. My sister, who actually spoke on this stage back in BOF Voices 2017, she sometimes talks to me about resilience. Resilience is a key skill that we need to give to our children. Resilience is being able to manage stress, challenges, trauma, or adversity that life brings and bounce back from it. But recovering from trauma rarely means returning back to the way you were. More often than not, we overcome life's toughest challenges by learning from our trauma and changing course. These are important lessons from our next two speakers. Rita Ora became the first British female solo artist to have 13 top 10 songs in the UK. She was born in Kosovo, in communist Yugoslavia, but fled with her family to the UK at the age of 1. They were among the tens of thousands who escaped the persecution of ethnic Albanians under the brutal dictatorship of Slobodan Milosevic. Billy Porter is the American singer and actor who is a 2-time Tony winner, a Grammy winner, and an Emmy Award winner for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Drama Series for his work as Pray Tell on that amazing TV series, Pose. Billy grew up Pentecostal in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He started singing in church from the age of 5, where his prodigious talent was clear from the start. But as a gay Black man, he was regularly told to hide his queerness. Billy is here with Rita to discuss how they've managed to build resilience in adversity and uncertainty. Please welcome Rita Ora and Billy Porter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What an intro.
I know, right?
I know. We've been sitting here watching all the talks, and I was thinking, wow, there are some pretty cool people in this room. Incredible. So lovely.
I haven't stopped crying since the photo.
I know, me too.
Since
yes.
the photo, I'm a mess.
Yeah.
So if I break down, please forgive me.
Yes, we're here for the tears.
Well, you wouldn't be here if you weren't amazing too.
Wow, thank you.
And I've had the pleasure over the last week or so, reading, researching, watching videos, immersing myself as much as possible into it, in between all the other planning for this event to understand the lives that you've both led, the amazing success that you've achieved,
thank you.
The challenges and barriers and obstacles that you faced, and the resilience that you've had to overcome. And so, Rita, I want to start with you.
Yeah.
I mentioned in the introduction, you came here at the age of 1.
Yes.
What are your first memories of growing up here in the UK, and what are the stories that your parents told you about the time when they had to suddenly leave the only country they knew?
You know, I think, well, first, my first impression was, thank goodness, to be frank. And I was only a baby, but when I grew up, I understood the desperation of survival kind of at a young age, with my parents really trying to find a level ground. And, you know, it is kind of the typical refugee story of trying to find a space in a world that you're not familiar with, and understanding the language, and trying to figure out a way to have a life, have a job, have a career. And I think my parents were really good at keeping that away from us as kids. I was very lucky to have parents like the ones I did, very hardworking parents that just muted all the noise, unless I was looking for it, which I did a lot. And they were sort of like, don't ask questions that you don't want the answers to. But I just was such a curious kid, you know. I was just so inspired by all the different ethnicities I was seeing growing up in West London, and in the country, you know, where I'm from. There really isn't that. And, you know, I go back all the time, and I actually just went back for my birthday. I turned 33 3 days ago.
Happy birthday.
And thank you. And I'm in the middle of shooting, actually, a documentary about the underground culture of the kids. You know, 60% of our population is under the age of 35, which is super young. And that just shows there's so much frustration and anger going on underneath all of the restraints that we've had to see in the history of our country. But also, for me, I go there and they just look at me like I'm sort of otherworldly, because I think it's just so not a real thing to them, that hope of just being able to do something that is just what I'm doing. I do the job of my dreams. I mean, I count my lucky stars every day, but I've worked my arse off to be here. And I think that when I go back there, I still can't connect the dots of that little bit of hope that just I thought this past trip that they've lost. And it was actually a really emotional trip for me, because I have been working with the producers of the Navalny documentary that did for the Ukraine, and they're really passionate about Kosovo, and especially where I'm from. You know, doing music and being a little bit outspoken is definitely, I don't know, controversial.
So take me back. You know, you said that you're doing the job of your dreams.
Yeah.
As a young person growing up in a refugee immigrant family in the UK, you know, I watched that incredible short documentary with Louis Theroux.
Thank you.
And saw your parents in it, and I understood that, you know, they were professionally trained in like medicine. Your mother was a doctor, but they weren't able to, like many immigrants, they weren't able to work in the kind of areas where they were trained. Your mother ended up staying at home.
Yes.
Growing up in that environment, like, how did becoming a musician become your dream? Like, how, like, if you didn't have someone to look up to, like that, like, for all those young people you were talking about there, they have you to look up to. Like, what was it that made you want to become a music superstar with 13 number one?
I know, we forget about those things. I try not to think about that much. I think for me, it was like we heard in the first talk, it was my way of escape. It was my way of hope. I think that was with you as well, and I will come to you, and I know that I've got lots of questions for you, but I just think that for me, I've got not a lot of options. And I remember this quote Steve Jobs said a long time ago, which was, if you ever have a plan B, you'll never be able to do your plan A.
Yeah.
And I just didn't have a plan B, apart from my parents being super angry at me for not wanting to go to college. It's not that I didn't want to. It's just that this was an opportunity I had of interning at a recording studio just to get some time to do a demo, because I didn't really have the funds to do that.
How old were you?
I was 16. Yes, so I left Sylvia Young Theatre School, great theatre school, but then I moved and I just took risks, and I was very brave. I think the idea of my dream was to be able to say one day, I don't have anything to prove anymore. And I think that's ultimately what we all want to achieve at the end of the day. And my goal, and I've been very vocal about it since the start, is to really remove that stigma of immigrants and refugees, because half of our entertainment industry is full of people that are from different places. Everyone you watch on TV has a history or a family tree of some sort that ranges so far, and I've been so vocal about it, and I'm okay with it, because I'll rather do that and move forward and open those doors like we've heard today in the talks, and take those beatings if I must, just to be able to say, Well, she did that, and she's from a little place full of 2 million people called Pristina. Like, no one even knew where that was.
Yeah.
And I think I'm still having that debate now of telling people where it is. There's a long way to go. Look, I can't change the world in a day or 2 or 12 years, however long I've been doing this now, for over a decade. But I'm never going to stop having these
Okay, so before we move on to Billy, I have one more question for you.
I know, I love to ramble on. I love chat.
It's good.
Sorry, I'm so in love with the chat. Okay.
This is all about chatting.
Yes, yes.
Tell me about your big break.
Oh my goodness.
The big break where the inflection point changed.
Okay, well, really brief. Okay, so I was found by a really famous person, and I was signed at 17. And his name was Jay-Z, and I thought all my dreams were going to come true, and there's this really huge, powerful force of nature.
How did Jay-Z find out about you? You'd only made your first demo 2 years earlier. So how did he?
Well, I shopped the demo around. I was like, does anyone want to sing my song? Because I'll definitely never be a pop star because it doesn't happen for a girl like me. So I'll sell my music. Anyone want my music? Does anyone want my music? And it got into the hands of somebody that was a business partner with Jay-Z's. And they said, wait, hold on a minute. Who's singing that? That's a pretty good voice. And then, ta-da. She came out of the woodworks. No, I think I just felt like it was my moment. And I just flew to New York on my own and came back with a record deal. And my parents at the time were thinking, what the hell is happening? I was like, just go with it. Again, you told me not to ask questions. Don't ask questions. It was all about protection for them. And they just wanted their kid to have some sort of...
Okay, so that's a good point.
Yes.
To move over to Billy.
Yes, please.
And find out about your life growing up. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Pentecostal.
Yes.
Singing in church.
Yes.
What was it like for you growing up?
Confusing. It was very confusing because God blessed me with a gift. Where I come from, that's what we say.
Yeah.
The gifts come from above, the universe, whatever. And when I was singing, I was fine. And at every other time, I was an abomination.
What do you mean?
I grew up in the Pentecostal church. Being gay is an abomination. Before I even knew what that meant, before there was even language for it, because I was a sissy. I didn't play sports. I didn't, they sent me to a psychologist when I was 5 years old for a year.
Who's they?
My family sent me to a psychologist every Wednesday after kindergarten. And so after the year, the lovely man said to my mother, he's fine. You just need to get a man around the house. Teach him to be more of a man, but that he's fine. And within a year, my mother had met and married my stepfather, who then proceeded to sexually abuse me from the time I was 7 to the time I was 12. So when the photographer?
Misan.
When Misan was talking about his childhood being nothing but trauma, that's all I had. All I had was trauma. It was, they cursed me from the pulpits. I would never be blessed. That rhetoric has no credibility anymore. Praise the Lord. And then I came out in 1985. I'm 54. I came out in 1985, right at the beginning of the AIDS crisis. So then there was that. So it was just trauma after trauma after trauma after trauma. And the only thing that I could do was sing. And every time I sang, no matter in what space I was in, the skies opened up. So it was like, well, let me focus on this. And because I was in Pittsburgh, and I wanted to be the male Whitney Houston, but I didn't have any access to that world. In Pittsburgh, it was theater school, it was dance school, it was drama school. So I immersed myself in that. And, you know, through a series of training programs, and I ended up going to a big mucky muck school in America, Carnegie Mellon, if you've ever heard of it, for drama and blah, 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 and all of that stuff. And, you know, it's just the fact that it was my talent that I could fall back on to get me out of my circumstance. It was my talent that enabled me to dream beyond my circumstance. So, Steve Jobs never had a plan B. Ain't no plan B. Because when you have a plan B, then that's what you're gonna end up doing.
Okay, so your plan A was clearly gonna be to pursue this gift that you've been given. What was your big break? Like, what was the thing that, you know, you said, okay, I think I can really, this is gonna happen?
Yeah, I think it was not a big break and much more of like what Malcolm Gladwell calls the tipping point. You know, 10,000 hours that makes you an expert. So I started as a singer. The confidence that gave me enabled me to expand. So then I started going to dance school. Then I started going to acting school.
The same for me too.
You know, and then, you know, but because it's all because I could sing.
Yeah.
Right? And so I had this power there. So I was confident enough to try the other stuff. You know, and then it wasn't just one thing.
Yeah.
Right? The second semester of my senior year of college, I was cast in the original cast of Miss Saigon on Broadway. I got a, you know, time to leave and I got to graduate. I did 4 Broadway shows. Then I got a record deal on A&M Records. You know, that was my first one. R&B in 1997, 27 years ago, being gay in that world was not possible. That didn't work out for me. Then, now Daddy's back.
Yeah.
Because my album just was released last Friday.
That's right.
Mainstream, again, in between I did 3 of my own. You know, so the years of building up, it wasn't just one thing. You know, then Kinky Boots, then Pose, then, you know, I did Star Search, you know, like there was so many different, over a long period of time, you know, and I'm grateful for all of them, and also patience. You know, what the length of time it took me to get to where I am now taught me is that it's all about patience.
Yeah, it is.
It really is all about patience and like just being where you are
in the moment.
In the moment and knowing that you're exactly where you're supposed to be with an eye toward what it is that you're desiring.
Okay, so you're on your path. There are some setbacks.
Oh yeah. Woo.
Rita, I want you to talk about your big setback first. So you had this like dream contract.
Yeah.
Jay-Z, Rock Nation, super famous and very influential global music icon. What happened?
Yeah, so for me, I had the big bang in the beginning, right? And I had the whole thing. This is the next biggest thing and blah, 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 blah. And don't get me wrong, my first album really did do well and I'm so proud of it. And that was with that deal. But after that, it was, but to get to that point, excuse me, just like Billy said, all the steps I had to take to actually get the attention that I deserved was a bit difficult. You know, people think just being signed and then everything happens. Well, you've still got to prove yourself once you're signed. Are you worth the money? Are you worth the spend? Are you worth the budget? And so I think I had to really push my own self and find my friends that produced dance music, which is my personal favorite, drum and bass and things like that. And that's when my first hit happened in 2012. And it was a #1 record, Hot Right Now with DJ Fresh. And that just then, the label said, okay, we got something here. So it was a real fight to even get them to sort of get me in that place of my first record. And like you, and surviving, that's probably why I do so many different things in entertainment. That's why I love doing television. My whole thing is connection. And with connection, you get a core group of individuals that know you and that believe you and that will stand by you through the test of time, whether it's different generations of social media, or if it's somebody that you just want to show up at your concert. It is all about connecting. And so everything for me with music and TV and film is just, that's the reason why I do more than one thing. You know, I like to look at myself as a 360 artist, and I've always has been so involved with fashion. And that's why I think the fashion community have taken me in so much, because I think that they see that bravery and that strive. And I haven't stopped. I mean, I've been doing this now for over a decade.
Rita, you still didn't tell me about your setback.
Oh, shit. I don't like talking about it, you know, because it's so traumatic. It was that.
They always want the drama.
They want the drama. You're right. He's right. It's
we lived through it already. I don't want to
Now we're going to talk about it. It was the idea. It was not having the belief from the team that told me all my dreams were going to come true. It was almost like an empty promise. And in my defense, I felt like our course was over and I needed to go and be brave and go against the biggest people in the music business so I can survive in the music business. And that was a real scary choice to make, because you don't want to mess with people that have so much power. It's definitely scary. And it was like either that or, I don't know, it's probably over for me. And so I did what I needed to do, and it was a very, very respectful separation, but that was a real heartbreak for me, because, you know, you want the dream to happen. You really want the end goal for everyone to win, you know, and it just didn't work out that way. And then I ended up owning my own masters, and now here I am. I put an album out this year, and I own all my own music.
Work.
So there's that.
Yeah. Well, I will.
And I would highly advise, if anybody has the opportunity to do that watching this, to really try and do that, because you'll thank yourself in the long run.
Billy, we were talking about, on the phone the other night, about your first album being, how many years ago? It said
27.
27 years ago. And it's taken until now for you to release the fifth album with you did the middle three on your own.
Mm-hmm.
What changed in that period? What's enabled you to come and sit back into that original gift that you were given?
Well, quiet as it's kept.
I love that saying.
Quiet as it's kept, the world has expanded and has grown. If you watch the news, you might not feel that. But the change has already happened, y'all. That's the reason the pushback is so severe, right? Those who know their history, those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. Every time there's a movement, every time there's an expansion in society and culture and the way that it's been over the last 60 years, and I'm going all the way back, over the last 60 years, there's gonna be a pushback like this, the one that we're in. Do not be scared. Do not fear. It's those of us who are inside of it like this. The world changed, right? I was not allowed to be Black and queer and out in the 90s. It just wasn't possible. I think there's a combination of me choosing myself and the world changing and us meeting together. Right? It was like in my early 30s when I had a very similar situation with my record label, and they were just shit. And, you know, it was just shitty, you know, and they did things to me where and because I was so young, and like you, I thought, oh, well, these people have had successes. They know better than me. I should listen. And I'm a collaborative person, so I listened more than I should have. And I learned that then. But, you know, I woke up one day and they had given my song from the First Wives Club to Celine Dion. They had given my song from the First Wives Club to Celine Dion. They produced it for her. It was in the same key. She sang the shit note for note. And you know how I found out?
How?
One of my best friends was a temping for Tommy Mottola. And her album came across his desk, and he looked at it, saw the title, and was like, and put it on and said, oh my God. And I was like, and so that was the moment where I thought, bye.
It's time to go.
Bye.
Yeah.
You know, and I had the meeting with the man, and I was like, oh, I'm leaving. He said, well, where are you going? I said, I don't know, but wherever it is, it's not here.
Wow.
What you gonna do? I don't know. But whatever that is, it's not gonna happen here. I didn't come to New York City and get in this business to be a demo singer for Celine Dion. No shade. She's fierce. She's fierce. I love her. She's fierce. This is not about her. And so that was a moment for me. And then it was inside of that decision that I even went a little further. I got a book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. If you ever know that book, you got to do that book. And it really helped me excavate a different kind of truth and like how I wanted to be in this business and in the world, which was the truth. And all of a sudden I realized, oh, I'm in this masculinity game. And the reality is I'm never gonna be masculine enough for anybody. I'm never gonna win that game. So let me take myself out of it. I just took myself out of it, period. And in the taking out of that, I created a whole lane for myself that almost nobody else is in. Because I saw the void and I filled it. Who else? Black, queer, get out. Who else? Who's gonna stand on their 2 feet and say, this is who I am, take it or leave it, right? And at the time, there was no success in it. I was watching Oprah, and she had Alanya Van Sant and Maya Angelou on, and they were talking about service. If you commit your intention to service, everything else will work itself out. After that show, I went to the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror and said, what does service look like? And just waited for the universe to speak to me. What is it? In a world, in an industry, and quite frankly, a world that's inherently narcissistic, what does that look like?
Yeah.
And it hit me like a ton of bricks. It's your queerness. It's the thing that everybody is telling you is your liability. Haters and allies alike. And it was my liability. For decades, it was. My queerness was. And then all of a sudden, and I say all of a sudden after 30 years, all of a sudden, I'm 54, bitches. I don't look like what I've been through. Black don't crack. You know, it's like, but after a while, all of a sudden, it was like your service is your queerness. All of a sudden, the roles. I was cast in the Revival of Angels in America.
Right.
I was cast as Lola in Kinky Boots. I was cast as Pray Tell in Poe. Like, all of a sudden, my service matters.
You know what I think is really interesting, and we have to wrap up sadly because
I know we're over time.
We're over. It's okay. It was well worth it. Culture, society, it caught up with where you were at. And the other day, I forget who I was having this conversation with, so if I don't credit you, please forgive me. But it's like sometimes you have to be ready to meet the moment. And you were both ready to meet your
Stay ready, then you ain't got to get ready.
That's right.
See, my Aunt Dorothy used to say, stay ready.
One really quick piece of advice from each of you, like 30 seconds. For people who face challenges, obstacles, all the stuff that you've both faced in your careers, what's the one piece of advice?
You have nothing to lose. Go for it. Just go. Go. Keep that train alive. Just don't stop and do not look right to left at all.
Or back, ever.
Or back. I just look. Just go.
Just look ahead. You know, Karl Lagerfeld used to always say that.
Yes.
I never look backwards.
Yes.
I only look forward.
I mean, I know. Okay, sorry. We're going.
Billy?
Over. Sorry.
One piece of advice.
Similar. Jump off the ledge.
Just go.
Just jump off the ledge. Always. Always. No matter how terrified you are, just jump off the ledge. Be terrified in the space. Do it. Anyway, George C. Wolfe, director of Rustin right now, is a friend of mine and a mentor of mine. And he also used to always say to me, never wait for anybody to give you permission to practice your art.
That's right.
You should be practicing it all day, every day, even when no one's listening, and most of the time, no one will be listening.
Amen.
Greatest advice I ever had.
Never play the blame game. That's another one. No, again, this isn't about anybody or anything. This was about you making choices and being brave enough to do what you need to do to survive.
Well, on that note,
I love you so much. Thanks for listening. Yes. Now we'll have fun later.
So these two gifted talents are our special performers tonight.
She called me and asked me. So
I did. I said, Billy, are you free? We've got something to do.
All right. Thank you so much for that. That's going to be absolutely epic this evening. All right. We were just talking about Rita's refugee experience, and I wanted to give you a little bit of a Voices update. Some of you may remember Dennis Okwara from his talk at last year's Voices. For those of you who weren't here, I want to give you a little reminder. Or for those of you who are here, a reminder. For those of you who weren't here, have a look at this, right?
So we came to the UK, me and my brother. It was in March, and I stepped out of the plane and I was like, wow, this is cold. What have I signed up for? But, you know, I was looking for safety. I was looking for freedom that I had never seen. So, and they took us into immigration room, and then they started asking us questions like, hey, what does your father look like? What's the name of your father? Do you know where he lives? Obviously, because we were really young boys, so they didn't want it to be, I guess, something else other than kids coming to their dad. And we knew what our dad looked like, but we had not seen him in years, because he went through so many obstacles to come to the UK. And I think at that moment in time, had that person not been my dad, I would have still said, "Oh yeah, that's my dad," because I didn't want to go back to that. I really didn't want to go back to that. I recently went to Uganda to obviously meet the community that I've been supporting there. I send sanitary, school essentials, nappies for young mums there, and formula food, because the girls in my community are not really supported in education, and all the women in that community are not supported. So, and yet the community depends so much on these women, you know. But going there, you know, it was quite emotional, because I got to meet my mother for the first time in 24 years. So it still can't. So I was like, I didn't know what it was like to have your own mum. So when she come up and we cuddled, and she was like, I'm sorry.
Please welcome following Dennis's talk here last year, he received a swell of support. And I wanted to get a little bit of an update on everything that's been going on with you. So many people here at Voices donated money to Dennis to support his cause. And we'll get to that in a minute. But first, Dennis, when you look at that clip now, you were really nervous. Yeah. You'd never given any talk before. You'd never told your story. No. Escaping from Uganda, escaping from a situation where you were being recruited to be a child soldier. How do you feel now when you look at that?
I see hope, and I'm glad that I did. You managed to convince me to come and share my story. It's definitely the best decision I've ever made, because As a kid, living in Uganda, sleeping in bushes most of the time, I've always dreamt of a day that I can liberate my community from such things. Because as a kid, I got to see so many bad stuff, but I just didn't want the new kids now that the war is over to still, because some of them at home, they still experience that because their mothers or their fathers were abductees and the war is over. So, and from primary 5 to primary 7, a lot of the kids in this school were born in refugee camps or they were born in the bush. There were girls who were given to rebels like, this is your wife. And you as a girl given to an army rebel guy, you gotta have kids with them. There was the kids who were born in the bush, they were the real pure rebel kids. And they were vicious, the one who grew up to be given guns, because they are molded from day one.
To become a child soldier and then join the army.
Yeah.
So you turned, what was amazing when Dennis first told me this story, he turned that story, that trauma, we were just talking about trauma earlier, and he started taking, well, you can probably tell, Dennis is a model. He was scouted on a tube or something, and like one of those stories. And he started taking his earnings from being a model here in the West and funding the education of young women, young girls in Uganda. So he showed up here and shared this story. And you ended up actually raising money here for the first time.
So a friend was like, well, if you're talking, why don't you set up like a GoFundMe or something so you can get help? Because I'm still struggling now to do it because the number of children has really gone up that have come to school. And I was like, okay, what should I set up? Like, do a GoFundMe. So I was in the room trying to figure out how to set a GoFundMe before my speech. But then the next day, I rang my uncle. I was like, Uncle, I think we're gonna build a school kitchen. And he's like, really? I was like, yeah, we're gonna build a school kitchen. So
why? How much money did you end up raising?
The next day, I think we had like 5K. And then all together, we ended up raising about 36K.
36,000 pounds.
And I, obviously with my modeling money, I put them together. We built a school kitchen, and an office and a storeroom. We filled the school kitchen with food. And the kids have been eating breakfast and lunch every day in school. But the enrollment number, the enrollment numbers has gone up so today we have 849 kids in school. So before we launched the free school meal program, there was 584. So from just that, about 7 months ago, we launched it. We've got
almost doubled the numbers.
Almost doubled the numbers, yeah. But my main thing is I wanted more girls in school. So, and I've managed to achieve that. So we got more girls than any school nearby in the region. The nearest school is like 7 miles away, but we've got more girls than any school around that region because it's a community that depends so much on women and the young girls beyond 16. There's no future for them apart from being a mother. Yeah. So this is why there's so many young mothers in this community. The average mother of 3 is no older than 24. And, how can I keep these girls in school more? So we got
36,000 pounds. You built the school. You have like almost 900 students now.
Yeah.
What do you need to do next, Dennis?
So we've got the facilities to cook food every day. So we've added more teachers. We need more teachers. And the next step is we're looking to get funding to build a dining hall. So the dining hall will help us for meetings as well, besides eating for the kids. Because when it rains now, we can't eat because
So they're eating outside?
Outside. They're eating outside.
On the ground?
On the ground, yeah. On the ground, literally. A lot of the classroom that we use now, some still study beneath trees, but the classroom we use, like some of it don't have a roof yet. So we need to build a dining room, and also we need to be able to expand on more classrooms.
Because the classroom is super packed now.
Super packed. And obviously, the other classroom were damaged by the rebels. Like they burnt a school down. Like, how could a human being do that? You burnt a school down. Okay. So it's just restoring the whole school. And I would like more kids to go beyond 16 years of age, because at the moment it's 5 to 16 in this school here. So the dream is to get them to go further than 16.
Okay, so the other thing that happened in the last year is you actually set up a foundation, right? The Lumule Foundation, which is based here in the UK.
Yeah, based here.
You know my biggest transformation I've seen in you, Dennis? You're an entrepreneur now. And what you're facing is what we call in entrepreneur land a scaling challenge. You're a social entrepreneur. He came with all his data and statistics, and I am so proud of you, and I'm so excited for what you're gonna do next with this. Your journey, which started, in part here at Voices last year as an entrepreneur, I know you're gonna go on and do amazing things.
Thank you. It was here, and I just want to say, thank you for creating such a community. And honestly, I didn't expect. I didn't know what I was. I knew I was sharing my journey, but I didn't expect such impact. I mean, it's lasting impact. Like I was showing you just now. Today is our AGM. Yeah. And before, parents didn't even turn up to hear the progress of their kids because they've not gone to school. But today, the whole place, the space. So we have a church there. Normally, some meeting happens in the church, but the church is so packed that parents are outside the church, and they're talking with like a speaker, so parents outside can hear it. This is the amount of like kids that are coming into the school.
That's amazing.
Now, we've got a farm as well, school farm. We've bought 10 acres of land, and we've grown beans, sweet potatoes, sunflowers, cassava, and vegetables. So, because the idea is...
And ugali. You can make ugali with the maize,
with
right?
Maize, yeah. Ugali. Yeah.
This is very special. Dennis and I were having lunch. I'm going to go to the Lumule Foundation and make a visit in 2024. That's what I'm going to do. Yeah. And I'm going to report back with everything that I've seen. But Dennis, congratulations to you. We are so proud of you, and we're all here to support you.
Thank you so much.
And I hope that we can find ways of supporting Dennis so he can build that dining hall and expand the potential for women beyond the age of 16. So look out for a link in your WhatsApp. Let's see what we can do for Dennis.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Much of the rhetoric around wellness revolves around the power of positivity, sometimes to the point that it can feel a bit trite. But Sammy Basso is here to give that new meaning. Sammy is a 27-year-old Italian man affected by Hutchinson-Gilford progeria syndrome. This makes him the oldest person in the world with this rare syndrome, which is characterized by physical symptoms suggestive of premature age. Sammy is not only an international ambassador for the Progeria Research Foundation, but also a molecular biologist tackling the disease from the perspective of both patient and medical researcher. Joining Sammy on stage is Annastasia Seebohm Giacomini, CEO of the Brilliant Minds Foundation. I am so grateful that she helped me to convince Sammy to join us here from Italy at Voices 2023. I think you might also be the very first pregnant person we've ever had on the Voices.
I need a minute to catch my breath. There's something in my diaphragm, so. I'm just going to set the scene a little bit, and I want to start with a disclaimer that I'm neither a doctor nor a scientist, but I'm a friend of Sammy Basso. I'm a great admirer of the work happening in his field. Every year, there are about 10 million babies born with genetic disorders caused by misspellings in their DNA. The strings of billions of A's, C's, G's, and T's that make up our genomes. Just about any type of genetic mutation can cause a disorder. Swapping the C with a T results in the rapid aging disease progeria. Replacing an A with a T causes the painful and deadly sickle cell disease. And the loss of all of these three letters is the most common cause of cystic fibrosis. These misspellings in our DNA collectively cause thousands of disorders that affect hundreds of millions of people and their families. To address the global health challenges caused by DNA mutations, scientists have developed amazing gene editing technologies. And one of those scientists is Sammy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sammy also has a knighthood. So, Sammy, can you tell us what is progeria?
Yes, progeria is a genetic disease. So we have to imagine our body composed by 37.4 trillions of cells. They are a lot. And in every cell, there is at least one nucleus. And inside, there is the DNA. And DNA can be imagined as a 3.2 billion of pairs of letters long instruction manual that the cell uses to act and to behave in the right way. So progeria is caused by just one letter changed. So there is just one mutation in 3.2 billions of letters. But it is a very important sequence. So this sequence usually is used for producing a protein called lamin A. And the lamin A is able to join the nuclear envelope and to organize the DNA in the right way. In progeria, because of the mutation, lamin A is aberrant, and we call it progerin. And progerin is not able to organize the DNA in the right way. So we have the loss of the DNA organization. And usually when it happens, we call it aging. So progeria is known as premature aging because of this reason. We see in the patients so many symptoms that are common in the normal aged people. So, for example, osteoporosis, arthritis, slow down of the growth, lipodystrophy, so many different symptoms. And the most dangerous symptoms are those related to the heart and the vascular system. So calcification of the cardiac valves, stiffness of the vessels. And this is one of the reasons why progeria has an average lifespan of 13.5 years. We are very rare. There is an incidence of progeria of just one person in 4 million of newborns.
Wow.
But given the life expectancy, we are just one person in 20 millions. So we are very, very, very rare.
And you're the oldest living patient, known living patient at 27?
Exactly. Well, 27.
And a half.
In some hour, I will be 28. What an amazing occasion for celebrating my birthday.
Yeah, we
you
can't wait.
A great gift.
We can't wait to celebrate with you later. what else is rare is that you're both a scientist of your own disease and a patient. Why do you think it's so important that we're studying this? What are some of the advances that have been made? And of course, being a patient and understanding your disease, you can offer a very unique perspective.
Yeah, to be a patient and a scientist is beautiful for me because it is a great antidote against fear. To know what is happening in my body helps me to live better. And research is very, very important.
Yeah.
Progeria can be a great model for so many different diseases. The cardiovascular one, the lipodystrophic one, and so many other. And every disease, when studied, can give answers for other diseases.
Yeah, of course.
We saw it with the cancer, because between cancer and progeria, for example, there is a correlation. So they are related, but they are also very different. And so many times, studying one of these, we found answers for the other. And I can say that we know the aging more studying progeria than studying the normal age.
Of course.
So progeria is a great model. It's a great model for different disease. And the research on progeria has a beautiful story. We started 20 years ago, 23, to do research. And so it was the 2000. And in 2003, we discovered the gene causing progeria. It was a real scientific miracle because just 3 years is nothing. It was nothing at that time. And in 2007, there was the first clinical trial for progeria patients. And this experimental drug was then approved in 2020 in the United States and in 2022 here in Europe. So it is a beautiful story of achieved goals, and we are so proud of it. And now we are working for different new technologies, new drug designed specifically for progeria, and technologies as base editing and prime editing that we know will be pivotal in the future.
Well, if you understand the disease of aging, you can understand disease in far greater detail. Moving away from the science and a bit more into your personal story, what has progeria taught you? What's it like to live with the disease?
Well, to live with progeria is difficult because it is a genetic disease threatening life of patients. So, for example, some years ago, I had a very important cardiac surgery. I had no choice. I had to do that, but the risk was 50 and 50. So progeria is very dangerous for patients, of course. But despite it, there is something more, something harder to face. That is the loss of autonomy and independence. So with progeria, you can't be autonomous at 100%. For example, I need a person every time to help me do also the normal things. You know, I can't just decide to go away for a week without telling anything to anyone, without giving answer to anyone. I can't do that. And so it is hard because adulthood would take you in this way of independence, while progeria pedal in the opposite. And that is difficult. But progeria taught me so many things. For example, progeria taught me not to believe anything to be granted. I risked my life so many times. I risked to die several times. So now every day for me is a gift. When I wake up in the morning, I have to be grateful for that day. I must be grateful for that day. And progeria taught me also to understand that the good in the world. If we just, if we see the television, if we watch the television, we can see about war, we can see about violence, and we could imagine that the world is a bad place to live in. And of course, sometimes the world is a bad place. But there is also good in this world. I experienced that because so many people knocked our home's door for asking us, what can we do for helping you? So there is a lot to fight for.
There is. One of the things that I find most remarkable and inspiring about you is that in spite of everything, or despite everything, you have such a positive outlook. You always, fill up a room with your positivity. We can talk a bit about how you sign off on emails with a big hug. But what has shaped your life with this positive light?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, it is a matter of logic sometimes. I must be positive because if I won't be, I would limit my life more than PROGERIA itself. I cannot, really. And my life is worth living, PROGERIA or not. I love my life.
Yeah.
I believe that I am part of the universe as everyone else. And so this is the only possibility for the universe to be myself. You are the only possibility for the universe to be Annastasia. So we can't waste this great opportunity. We need to be the best copy of ourselves. And of course, faith is very important for me. I believe in God. And sometimes when life is very hard, I ask, where are you? What do you know what it means to live with such a disease or with such difficulties? But my faith remembers me every time that I believe in God that was a person. So he experienced everything like us. And it makes me to feel very happy and positive. Then, of course, I must say I'm lucky. I'm very, very lucky because, sure, I was born with one of the rarest diseases in the world, but I was never been beaten hard or no one fight against me. I have just to face a disease, not people fighting against me. And that is, I must say, I'm very lucky. Despite it, there are some days that I'm very tired and I say, okay, this is too much. I won't be here. I don't want to be here. I don't want to wake up. I'm tired of my life. And in this case, I have the only real secret, that is the others.
So hormonal for this session, yeah.
So my family, my friends are very important for me. And they are the reason why I wake up every morning. Sometimes when I'm too tired, I remember that my life is not only mine. So if I can't do it for myself, I must do it for them. And yeah.
Indeed. And do you sign off every single email with a big hug because that encapsulates your life philosophy?
It is kind of philosophy. I don't know if I have a real philosophy, but yeah, this is just, I try to live my life in the best way, just this. The science helped me a lot because it gave me a reason for living too. We were talking about base editing and prime editing.
Yeah, of course.
And it is a project in which I'm involved, and maybe I can explain it.
Sure, I think that's useful.
So we are researching for a real cure for progeria. So I told you that the research on progeria is a very great story, but now we are at the turning point for the research. So you may know about the CRISPR-Cas9. That is a method able to go in a specific sequence of the DNA and to cut the sequence. And it is very useful if you have to knock out a gene, but not really if you have to modify a gene. And there is a scientist, David Liu, that with his team developed a new approach called the base editing. With the base editing, it is like if he has a molecular eraser and a molecular pencil, he is able to go exactly in this sequence to modify. And it is like if he delayed the wrong letter and rewrite the right letter. So we know that if we are able to do it in every single cell of our body, we are able to cure progeria. We are not able to do right now, but we know we can heal, we can treat an amount of cells. And the expecting results are more than what we have ever seen before. So it is great because now there is a team. David Liu is part of this team.
Yeah, he's amazing.
I'm part of this team. And this team, led by Progeria Research Foundation, is trying to translate this technology in a clinical trial for patients. So maybe we are not able to do it perfectly the first time, but in the near future, when a family has a diagnosis of progeria, it will not be like for my family. For my family, it was a nightmare because when I was 2 years old, there was no research, there was no hope. Now, in the near future, we will be able to say to a family, okay, your child has progeria. It is one of the rarest diseases in the world, but we have a technology able to cure your child, and he or she will live as a perfectly normal person. That is enough. It is great because the easier thing we can do once we know how to do it perfectly is to change the focus.
Yeah.
So we can focus to another mutation for treating another disease. So thanks to the base editing, we are able to treat around, when it will be developed, we will be able to treat the 30% of the genetic disease in the world. What for the other 70%, David Liu invented another technology able not just to rewrite a letter, but to rewrite entire sequences of the genome. So maybe, starting from one of the rarest diseases in the world, we can pave the way to treat 400 million of people in the world. We will need a great commitment.
Sure.
We will need a lot of money, a lot. So if someone wants to help us, we are open, please help us. What we can promise is that, promise is that we will never stop until we will arrive to the real cure.
Thank you. Two very quick things to close out on. And we were talking that our ability to improve our condition and the condition of our children is perhaps the defining trait of our species. So I'm going to ask two final, very quick questions, one on the scientific front and the other just on the philosophical front. For the public or people that are interested in how they can be involved, what's the best way for people to find out more? Should they come up to you, give you a birthday hug and chat with you later? What do you want to say to people on the scientific side about what's important for people to know?
Well, it is important to know that we will not stop until the end. So, and that everyone can be involved. Really, we need the help of everyone, and everyone can put their signature in this project. This will be a project that will change the way we are thinking biology and medicine. Because, can you imagine, it will be a one-shot treatment. A person with a genetic disease can just have a shot and he will be okay. So it is something that it was science fiction since 5 years
exactly.
ago.
So
So now we are here in this turning point. You can be part of it. So please, if you are interested, ask to me or go on our website. You can just PROGERIA and you will find us. And we will be very happy to do this way all together.
And then finally, so this is part of the Live Your Best Life session, and you are an inspiration that indeed does live your best life. Either tell us what inspires you to do that, or what piece. Everybody faces turbulent times in their professional lives, in their personal lives. What piece of advice, what parting piece of advice would you give to us as an example?
Wow. I'm not a person that used to give advice because I'm just trying to live my life at best. Sometimes I'm not able. I mean, what I told you maybe can be my philosophy of life, to try to do the best, to believe to the oneness of everyone. But I'm not able every time to think in this way. But I would say two things. The first is never think that you are not enough to make the difference. You are enough. Just start to do the right thing and you will find you to do the impossible. I really believe that because so many people told us it is impossible to do research in such a rare disease. Now, thanks to that rare disease, we are opening such a great way for treating so many others. We are making the difference, but we are just working, we are just believers. We just believed it was possible, and we act in this way. So just do that. And the second one is build your own community of people. Without my family, I wouldn't be nothing. Without my friends remembering me every time who I am, why I am here, I wouldn't be nothing. The other people, the dear people, are really the reason why my life is worth living. So,
thank you, Sammy.
Thank you, thank you.
See why it's my favorite session? Celebrated for her innovative and socially conscious approach to design, South African-born Sumayya Vally has gained international recognition as the lead architect for the acclaimed Serpentine Pavilion in 2021, which drew on places of meeting, organizing, and belonging for London's cross-cultural and diasporic communities. Sumayya's perspective on architecture is deeply rooted in her experiences growing up in apartheid South Africa, where the physical structures were a manifestation of division and silence. She observed that if architecture possesses the power to separate and dispossess, it equally wields the potential to unite and give voice to the silence. Through her work, she strives to build worlds, connecting buried histories to present-day consciousness and transforming voicelessness into advocacy. Please welcome Sumayya Vally on Why I Build Bridges.
Oh my God, I can't fathom that Imran put me in this session. And he told me on the call, this one is called Live Your Best Life, you're gonna be great, and I am by no means changing the world as much as everybody else that we've just seen. So Imran, I hope I'm able to honor you, and thank you everyone for everything you've shared, formal and informal conversations. It's been such an immense honor. So I'm Sumayya, and I'm an architect from South Africa. And when I was invited to make this presentation, Imran asked me to think about why I build bridges. And I guess I build bridges because I don't know how not to. I just do. I'm from many worlds. I am South African of Indian heritage, I'm Muslim, and I live between London and Johannesburg. Like so many of us, I find myself on either side of things all the time, and to connect things is also to keep myself together. Growing up in an apartheid city where architecture was defined by the project of segregation has shown me that if it has the power to do that, as Imran said, if it has the power to dispossess and to silence, then we have to understand that it also has the power for the opposite. It possesses an even greater power to bring people together. This work begins when we start listening deeply to the context within which we work. Construction does not begin when we dig a hole in the ground. The world is really constructed when we excavate the untold stories and histories that lie waiting in place. I'm really interested in thinking about the role of architecture in bringing these stories to the surface. So when I was invited to make a pavilion for the Serpentine in Kensington Gardens in London, I had to think about what someone like me from Johannesburg had to say on this platform, really in the heart and in the center of London. And I thought about London's waves of migration and how so many people over time have made the city a home. If shelter is the most basic unit of architecture, then we have to understand that safety and belonging and the idea of a home are at the core of our impulse to build. And this is something that I'm always going back to in my practice. The ground from London really comes from all over the world. And when new arrivals come to London, like so many people talked about today, the way that we find ways to make home is by engaging in grounding practices. And I really wanted to look at these in London. So the pavilion was a response to and a celebration of all of these stories and voices, and I really wanted to draw inspiration from the underrated spaces of cultural production that allowed so many people to find a home in London. I looked at, among others, the British Mosque in London, the Centre Price Publishing House, which was a radical community publishing house in London, the Four Aces Club in Dalston, which was the first venue to play black music in London, markets, local grocers and stores where people could find ingredients for traditional recipes. These are everyday places of belonging and of resistance. But many of these places have been erased, and in the present day, architects and developers are continuing to erase them in our practices. We're unable to recognize the power of these spaces. In the studio, we worked on mapping out 52 places of home that have been erased from the archive. And the pavilion drew on these gestures of generosity and abstracted them into gathering spaces for people to come together. This was also just after COVID, I think a time when we were all really celebrating what it means to come together. But one of the most integral parts of this pavilion was about folding London into the pavilion. And I wanted to also take the heart of Kensington Gardens, this power that the Serpentine has as an institution, and fold it back out into the city. So I placed four small fragments in community arts institutions across the city. And each piece was a very small public offering. So I worked with a little shelf at New Beacon Books, which is the first and largest collection of Afro-Caribbean history in the UK. And it became a place over the summer where we held many events. We held poetry recitals. It also was then used for exhibition. We had a seat at the Tabernacle, which was used for the commencement of the Notting Hill Carnival. And then I worked with Brian Eno and the team at the Serpentine to launch a radio station in Barking and Dagenham, which is also a very important form of public space. And the artist-in-residence, Joe Nami, worked to collect neighborhood and community stories. So these little architectures formed a bridge between the Serpentine and myself. And I really wanted to be able to honor and extend existing relationships and start to birth new ones. And this takes me to the next project I wanted to talk about. So when someone says the word Islamic art, we all have very particular images that come to mind. We probably all imagine domes, arabesques, mosaics, ornate calligraphy. But this definition of Islamic art didn't originate with the faith. It came to us from 17th century France, and it's always been defined from the outside in, from perspectives of geography or chronology or style. It really orientalized and objectified these art forms that evolved from culture. So when I was appointed as the artistic director of the first Islamic Arts Biennale in Jeddah, I immediately understood this as a profound opportunity to think about the definition of Islamic art from a decolonial perspective, from the inside out, and from the perspective of experiences rather than the perspective of objects. And in a world with over 2 billion Muslims, to define the Islamic world in geographic bounds is really arbitrary. Is it South Asia? Is it South Africa? Is it South London? I think it's really defined by our rituals and our experiences. And so again, I went back to the idea of home. And I thought about what it means to share a spiritual home with so many people across the world, across time. The site that we chose for the Islamic Biennale was an unused part of the Hajj terminal airport where pilgrims first land when they come to the Holy Lands. And just by virtue of millions of people convening here for pilgrimage, it has been a nexus of cultural production. And Malcolm X noted this several times over in his letters and postcards to Gloria Owens during the Hajj. He famously wrote, "There were tens of thousands of pilgrims from all over the world. They were of all colors, from blue-eyed blondes to black-skinned Africans. But we were all participating in the same ritual, displaying a spirit and a unity of brotherhood that my experiences in America had led me to believe could never be possible." During the past 11 days here in the Muslim world, I have eaten from the same plate, drunk from the same glass, and slept on the same rug, while praying to the same God with fellow Muslims, whose eyes were the bluest of blue, whose hair was the blondest of blonde, and whose skin was the whitest of white. And in the words and in the deeds of white Muslims, I felt the same sincerity that I felt among the Black African Muslims of Nigeria, Sudan, and Ghana. So to be a Muslim really means to be part of this connected global community, a community that gathers in faith, that shares pain, loss, prayer, celebration, memory, and imagination. And there are instinctive things that make each of us feel like we belong. Sounds, smells, forms of generosity and hospitality that all of us recognize as home. In our cultures, as we heard today, we don't preserve by keeping things static and petrified and putting them in glass boxes. Preservation is really carried generation to generation through our rituals, in the oral, and the performed. And this is the energy that I wanted to bring to this Biennale. I wanted it to be a different definition of Islamic art. So in this work by Joe Nami, the same artist in residence from the Serpentine radio station, Joe choreographed the sounds of 18 different calls to prayer from small, unexpected places. A shop in Japan, a parking garage in Detroit, a chip shop in Cape Town. And he explored the idea of cosmic breath, that every second of the day, when the prayer time is called, when the prayer time is called every second of the day, it's called somewhere on earth because it moves with the movement of the sun. And every time we respond, we join in this undulating form of energy, connected with billions of people across time, past, present, and future. And that sound, if we imagine the movement of the sun, has never stopped since the time of Muhammad, peace be upon him, and will never stop until we die. In this piece, Amongst Men by Harun Ghantali, it was made in honor of a South African Muslim cleric and anti-apartheid activist who was killed by apartheid police while in prison. So Harun recreated or evoked the funerary procession of this man, which was attended by 40,000 mourners. And we have this feeling of walking through the procession where he cast 1,000 kufic caps. And as we walk with the procession, we encounter audio of the Imam's sermons, letters that he wrote to his daughters from prison, and oral testimony from the trial, which was just concluded in South Africa last month. His perpetrators were found guilty of torture. And through this work, I wanted to remind us that beyond all of our worship, our actions and the way that we are with each other are actually all that we leave behind. And that is the greatest form of worship. And then lastly, from the Biennale, this work, Anywhere Can Be a Place of Worship, by Scene Architects, a young collective from Riyadh, is a reflection of the Prophet's first space of prayer. We don't see any domes, we don't see any minarets. It's made entirely of palm fronds that disintegrate entirely into the ground. At 5 times a day, hosts in the space rake fresh lines into the ground, so it's also a performance work. There are niches that tell us about the time of day. So it's really about going back to basics, about how we touch the earth gently, how we listen to the seasons. And we're reminded throughout the experiences in this Biennale that place is made by the rituals and the acts that bring us together. I'm currently working in many contexts where I think we can understand that we need to be able to listen to the ground. I'm working on projects in Kakuma in Kenya in the refugee camp. I'm working on a project in Sylhet in Bangladesh where the borderline was drawn during partition. And in those contexts, it's easy to understand that there are many untold stories that are waiting to be heard. When I received a brief for a project in Belgium, I thought that perhaps I'm not the right architect to work on this because there are many architects who I knew were competing who know the Belgian landscape very well. But I started to do some research, and it turns out that the town that I was working in, called Vilvoorde, was home to this incredible man, Paul Panda Fanana. And Paul he was the first person from the Congo to come to Belgium. And study there. He studied horticulture in the horticultural school. He was a genius. He passed cum laude. His research contributed to what the landscape of Belgium looks like and that we still experience today. He was then conscripted to the war, and he became a soldier fighting for the Belgian army. And like all other people from the Congo, he was treated with extreme discrimination. And this turned him into an activist. So after the war, he came back and he started to organize Pan-African conferences with several prolific figures all over Europe, with Du Bois and several others. He made perhaps the single most contribution to the lives of Black people in Belgium when he advocated for wages for Black people to be more fair. But despite these immense efforts, Fanana is really not widely known in the country, and there's nothing in the landscape or in the city of Vilvoorde that commemorates his life and his contributions. And when I found the story of Fanana, I knew that I wanted this project to honor him. So we went and started to look at water architectures from the Congo, and I found these incredible boat structures. And when they're stacked up next to each other, they become places for people to trade and to gather. And I really enjoyed the sentiment. So our bridge draws on this, and we've created a series of stacked boats that also honors the archive and works with the same forms that we saw from the Congo. Each boat is going to be planted with species that come from Fanana's horticultural research. So we are immersed in his work in these little gardens of reflection, perhaps where we can meet a friend, where we can sit and pause during the day, or where we can look out onto the water and reflect on the goods and the bodies that it brought in. There are also going to be ancillary smaller boat structures that will float along the riverbank and pollinate new ecologies in this previously industrial zone where so many people lost their lives toiling in this landscape. In the lead up to the announcement of us winning this project, articles entitled "Who Was Paul Panda Fanana" were published in the Belgian papers. And it was subsequently announced that Fanana has finally been included in the Flemish canon. And I think that this is the power of architecture, because architecture endures and it carries the story of who we are beyond our lives. So this bridge is, of course, a physical structure, and I'm really interested in how architecture can bridge worlds from buried histories to present-day consciousness, and from silence and whispers to advocacy. Final note to end. So when I was in architecture school and I was studying, I was really very hungry, even though I couldn't articulate it at the time, for references that I could find that were resonant with my experiences, but I didn't find them anywhere in the school. Where I did find them was in my city. And a few years ago, I was asked to pen a letter to a younger architect. So I thought of that student, Sumayya, and I thought of the little Sumayya walking the streets of inner city Johannesburg from rows of textiles in my grandfather's store to the Joburg City Library. I grew up in an apartheid city, but on top of and underneath that city, in its rogue economies, in its rituals, and in its people, there are entirely new worlds that are waiting to take form. So it says, "Dear younger Sumayya, there is always architecture waiting to happen in places that are overlooked. You will soon fall in love with gold, kitsch, supernatural ideas, as you can see, with very strange and everyday things. A disco church on wheels in the inner city, the performance of a ritual gathering on a patch of felt grass of a traffic island next to a highway, the rhythms and space of an Ethiopian coffee ceremony, the smell before a high felt thunderstorm, the choreography of Furstenberg on Friday, before, during, and after prayer time, the specific color spectrum of a mind dump sunset, the tenacity of indigenous plants and indigenous ceremonies and practices, all the magic that is Joburg. There is another canon here. Ingest atmospheres, learn how to read and feel color, dust, mist, the phases of the moon. There is another canon here. Look deeply at these things, feel them, absorb them. You will soon develop a mistrust for the historical record. Listen to that. Look so deeply at what is present that you notice the silences and the absences too. There is another canon here, in these silences and absences. Read in other languages, write in your mother tongues, look deeply at sentence structure and vocabulary. There is another canon here. Learn how to dissect the index of an archive and how to make your own indexes for archives. Stay soft and sensitive, especially in my profession. It is a deep strength and architecture needs it. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. Don't listen to anyone who tells you that everything you can ever imagine has already been done. They are incorrect. Beauty and social justice are not mutually exclusive. Beauty is social justice. There are an infinity of untold stories, unheard voices, unrealized dreams, and undreamt worlds. Poetry is a necessity, and dreaming is everything. Love from an older Sumayya. Thank you.
Our next speakers have a lifelong friendship. Some of you will remember author and wellness guru Deepak Chopra from our virtual Voices in 2020, where he spoke about how meditation can improve our lives. Deepak Chopra has worked alongside everyone from Oprah Winfrey to Michael Jackson and is one of the world's most prominent advocates for alternative medicine. Joining him and returning to the stage after her conversation with Charmaine this afternoon is Diane von Furstenberg. Together, they're here to tell us about Diane's mindfulness journey and share some valuable lessons on the power of inspiration. Please welcome Deepak Chopra and Diane von Furstenberg to the Voices stage.
Well, this has been overwhelmingly inspirational, with the common theme of trauma and triumph. Every story that we heard was a story of trauma that surfaced ultimately as triumph. And before I start asking you my first question, I'd just like to tell you what the biology of trauma is for 1 minute or less. So trauma begins when we see somebody as separate from ourselves. Trauma is a result of the hallucination, socially and culturally induced, of the separate mind. And when there is separate mind, it begins with trauma. The memory of trauma is anger. Anger leads to hostility, which is retribution and vengeance, leads to guilt, shame, and ultimately to depression. And today is the #1 pandemic of our time is depression, which leads to inflammation and every kind of chronic disease. We heard from this great gentleman here, so grateful to listen to you, sir, that it's a very rare disease, progeria, but all genetically determined diseases are rare. Less than 5% are genetically determined. Of those, progeria is even more rare. And that's the gift you're bringing, the gene editing for that. But the rest is epigenetic. It's recycled trauma, inflammation, chronic disease, mental disease. So my first question is, and we'll address later, perhaps, if you have a second, what the triumph is from trauma. But Diane, one of your parents was a Holocaust victim, right? How did that influence your childhood?
My mother, at the age of 21, she was living in Belgium. She was an immigrant, kind of a refugee from Salonika, Greece. But she grew up, she came in Belgium, she was 5 years old. She grew up, she was a very good student. She was very ambitious. She wanted to be a scientist. And then, just as she was about to finish high school, there was a war and there was the racial laws. And therefore, she could no longer finish school officially. The headmistress liked her a lot, so she stayed in the class and did the study, but was not registered. And the headmistress was a resistance. She was in the resistance, and I believe that's why my mother got into the resistance. I found this out very recently. And so she was caught, trafficking papers and so on. So she was caught. She was put into jail. She went to the police, and she was so afraid to be tortured in order to have the information on the resistance. She said, no, I'm Jewish, which she was. And the woman there said, don't say you're Jewish, they're going to ship you out. Anyway, so she went to a jail until the convoy was full, and she ended up in Auschwitz. I'm sorry, but since you asked me, I have to give it the story. So, because it's important. So when she was she always said the worst thing was being in this cattle wagon, which, the trip between Brussels and Poland was 4 days, and there was no light and no music, no water. And And she always said it was the most horrible thing. She became friends with an older woman. She was 20 or 21, and there was a woman who was 40. She became friends, and that woman spoke a little German. So my mother said, no matter what, I'd never leave this woman. So they arrived, and they stayed in a big, long line, and there was a soldier who would, say, you go right, you go left, you go right, you go left. And behind the soldier who was doing the selection, on a higher podium, there was a man all dressed in white who was just watching, and he wasn't saying anything. And when time came for the friend of my mother, the soldier said to her, you go right. And my mother, without being told where to go, followed her friend. And the soldier let her go. The man in the back, who hadn't moved, came down running, took my mother and whipped her and threw her on the other side. And my mother looked at him with so much hate. And why? Well, it turned out that he saved her life. And my mother always said, this was the first time I ever hated anyone, and the last time. Because even though that man was Joseph Mengele, the angel of death, he happened to save my mother. So it's all very dramatic, but it is what it is. She survived. She stayed in the camp for 13 months. I mean, she did the death marks. She went to a second camp, Ravensbrück, and another one. And in June 45, very, very late, because she was caught very late, she was liberated, and she weighed 49 pounds, 29 kilos. And she was nothing but bones. And her parents couldn't believe when she came back. Everybody thought she was dead, but she wasn't dead. And her mother fed her like a little bird. Every 10 minutes, a little bit of food. And she gained her weight. She was never really big. She was tiny. And 6 months later, her fiancé came back, and they got married. And the doctor said, you have to wait at least 2 years to have a child, because you won't make it. You will die, and your child will not be normal. And 9 months later, I was born, and I was not normal.
So
I was a triumph over misery.
And then you ended up marrying a prince.
I did. and a German one, too. He was half German and half Italian. And my mother loved him. And so the morale of all that is she taught me that fear was not an option. That no matter what, you could never be a victim, never be a victim. And everything was about honoring life. The day I was born, I had won, so I had done my biggest triumph just by being born. So everything after that was a plus.
How did you get up into the United States?
Oh, as a princess.
Tell us about it.
I married a prince, I became a princess. And usually in fairy tales, it's the end of the fairy tale. The girl marries the prince. In my fairy tale, it was only the beginning. And why am I being emotional? Charmaine said I'm never emotional. I got into emotional now. She tried to get me emotional the entire time she was shooting me. Anyway, so what was I saying? So what was important, I did not know what I wanted to do, but I knew the kind of woman I wanted to be. I wanted to be in charge. I wanted to be free. Freedom. I wanted to be my own person. And I wanted to have a man's life in a woman's body. And I did. And the way I became that woman was a little dress. And that little dress made me be able to pay my bills and to be independent, to be successful. And because it was a dress,
the wrap dress.
The wrap dress. My confidence was that dress, and I was sharing that dress with millions of women. So yes, I invented the wrap dress, but really the wrap dress made me. And I became this conduit, for freedom and for women and for what the fuck and for that. And my mother always said, God saved me so I can give you life. By giving you life, you gave me my life back. You are my torch of freedom. And so I was born with a torch of freedom in my hands. And yes, it could be a little heavy for a little girl, but I liked it. And my mother didn't want me to be afraid. She was afraid of the dark. She locked me in the closet. Today she would go to jail for that. But as a result, I'm not afraid.
The wrap dress became a symbol of women's liberation and empowerment, and caught the attention of people in business school as well. What first gave you the idea of the wrap dress?
Oh, you don't want me to talk about
that?
Oh no, fashion. I was vaguely interested in fashion. I did not go to fashion school. I went to business school. And my first job, I was working for a photographer's agent, and he lived in his little townhouse in Paris. It was very glamorous. He represented all the best photographers, from Helmut Newton to David Bailey to Richardson to blah, blah, blah. And I was just there answering the phone and, making the thing and going to advertising agencies and showing the photographs and answering the phone and saying this guy was not there, either to the photographers that he owed money to or to the girls he slept with the night before. And so my first thing in fashion was the image of fashion. And then I met an Italian man, who had a printing mill in Como. And he said, if you're interested in fashion, come and see where it happens. So I went to, there, and I was just an intern, and all he wanted to sleep with me, which never happened. I slept with his son instead. And I didn't say that in the documentary. Anyway.
You have to do some retakes, Sharpie.
Anyway, but I learned everything about printing and color and blah, blah, blah. And I happened to be at the right time at the right time, because then this man's business got bigger, and then he bought the factory next to it. He bought it just for the walls, and that factory made stockings. Before there were pantyhoses, there were stockings. And of course, nobody was buying stockings anymore. Anyway, so he bought that factory, and there were all these machines that were knitting tubular machines. And so he said, what can we do with these machines? And so we called the yarn manufacturers, and we experimented these machines with thicker yarn. Anyway, so he invented this great jersey fabric. So jersey fabric and printing, blah, blah, blah. And so I thought, maybe that's interesting, but I wasn't sure. Then my mother gave me for Christmas, for my birthday, a trip to go to New York to visit my boyfriend, Egon. And so I went to New York. I know it's long, answer, but I went to New York, and there I discovered New York, and oh my God, and my boyfriend was this attractive prince, and we were invited everywhere. So the young designers wanted me, dress me. So that's when I met Giorgio Santangelo and Holston and Stephen Burrows. And they were all making these very, very different clothes than in Europe. So I stayed there for a month, and then I had to go back to work, back to my life, and all I could think about is, how do I go back to New York? And when I went back to that factory, I arrived that morning, I just thought, oh, maybe there's something here for me to try to do and sell it in America. And that's what happened.
So from the height of fame and becoming a celebrity, you then had a crisis, financial crisis.
I had many crises. I mean...
But bankruptcy.
Yeah, but I mean, we all have crises all the time. I mean, and when people think you are at the very height, very often you yourself know you're not. Because you yourself, I was on the cover of Newsweek, an interview, and Wall Street Journal, blah, blah, blah. And so everybody was acclaiming me, but I knew that, I'm not so sure, because I was saturated. Anyway, at the same time, when people think, oh, she's over, you know it's not true, because you already know you're on your way. So life is up and down and reinvent. So I don't know if it took me, I had to get the CFDA Lifetime Award to call myself a designer. But because I didn't go to fashion school, I thought I wasn't a designer. But the one thing I know I am, I can design life. I can navigate. You're not in charge of your destiny, but you can navigate your destiny and, go by the landscape. And I keep on inventing myself all the time. And I wake up and I say, what a loser. But you know what? Only losers don't feel like losers. And then you go back. And I get up and I see myself in the mirror and I wink and I say, okay, another day. And now I am, he and I are the oldest people here. We are the same age, 77. No, I'm not yet 77. 76. How old are you?
I'm 77, and so are you.
No.
Soon.
In 1 month.
And
New Year's Eve.
okay.
In New Year's Eve.
I got to 77 in October. She'll get there
New Year's
in
Eve.
December.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right. In any case, by the way, I want to tell you that this man, with enough talking about me, 28 years ago, or 29 years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer. I had a cancer at the base of my tongue. And I was quite shocked. I couldn't really believe what happened. And a friend of mine said, you should meet Deepak Chopra. And here's his number. Oh, and then Deepak, he called me, and he happened to be, I was at home in Connecticut, and he happened to be in Yale, right?
Yeah.
What?
Story is about you, not about me.
No, but it's about our encounter.
Okay.
All right, and he says, I'm coming tonight. And sure, I remember so well him driving his little car in the driveway, and we had dinner and we talked, and Deepak taught me how to meditate. And I had 8 weeks treatment, and Deepak called me every day. And I am not a guru type, I am not any of that, but Deepak is probably one of the most intelligent men I know. He has a way with solutions and words that is magical. And you can never underestimate the power of words and the energy of words. And he taught me these sutras, and I still practice them. And anytime I have a friend in need, Deepak is always there. And it's a combination of heart, intelligence, and what else? Just heart and intelligence, but I don't know which one more. Maybe intelligence.
Maybe compassion.
Well, yes.
So, and she's never looked back since 28 years now?
Yeah.
And now then philanthropy is one of your big passions?
Well, now we don't have much time left, so I think this today was really amazing because it was about honoring life. It was about giving. Someone said, you know, giving is such a gift, and we all have to give. And I never really loved the word philanthropy because it sounds like landscaping. You feel like you need an expert. And but it is about being human, and it is about paying attention to others. I have a little game that I do every day. And every day, one of the first things I do is I try to connect one person to a person they would have never been able to meet on their own. And that is a miracle. And we all have a magic wand. And the more we use a magic wand, the more powerful a magic wand is. And we can't really use a magic wand on ourselves, but the magic wand comes back as a boomerang.
Okay, since we've run out of time, I just want to ask you a question. Have you found the day inspiring?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to ask you the same question, but don't answer it till I raise my hand, okay? Have you found the day inspiring?
Yes.
So that place between the question and the answer is where we're all one. And that's also the place where inspiration and gifts come from. It's our soul. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's that time, last talk. Those of you who come to Voices every year, you know that I think very carefully about the last talk. Well, I think carefully about every talk, but especially the last talk. Our next speaker is a seasoned executive, brand strategist, and LGBTQ+ activist. He's not only navigated intricate landscapes of corporate boardrooms, but he's also embarked on a profound personal journey that transformed his vulnerability into a source of strength. We first met 5-6 years ago at a lunch. We happened to be seated next to each other at the Cannes Lion Film Festival. And we had, you know when you meet someone and you feel instantly connected to them? That's how I felt. And we went off on our merry ways, and then COVID happened. And in January of this year, it was Emma Clark, the very first BOF employee, sent me a post on LinkedIn, from LinkedIn, and she said, this guy would be a good Voices speaker. I click on the link. I'm like, oh, it's Jonathan. So I got in touch with him when I was in Los Angeles earlier this year, and we met for the second time in 5 years. And I think that lunch reminded both of us of that initial connection that we had. And this time I got straight down to business. I was like, you need to come to Voices. And he was kind of like, you know, it's far away, and I live in LA, and I'm a very busy guy, and I have a foundation, I'm selling my company, I have a little stuff going on. I said, please, it's really special, and it would really mean a lot. And I'm so grateful that Jonathan's here. You're going to find him just as magical as I did. There's Jonathan Mildenhall.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. The 25th of May, 2020 was one of the most painful days of my life. And I was not alone because on that day, this man, George Floyd, was brutally murdered by a white police officer whose name I will not mention. I was traumatized by watching this experience unfold, but as Misan said, so was the rest of the world, because it ignited a series of social protests on a scale that human history has never seen. In hundreds of cities on every single continent, people protested about racial inequality and systemic racism. Now, the reason why it was so traumatic to me as I was watching these events unfold is because laying in their crib next to me were my babies. My husband and I, 6 months before, had had our twin likes via surrogacy. A little white-skinned boy named Oliver and a brown-skinned girl named Dominica. Now, I grew up in racism, but I didn't grow up in anything like the racial intensity of the United States. And here I am, bringing up my children in that country. I didn't know if I could do that. I didn't know if that was serving my daughter right. Now, here my children are now. The most beautiful little brown-skinned girl, the most beautiful little white-skinned boy, they are equal. And nothing in my life will ever let anything happen to Dominica to make her feel less than. Now, the following Monday, after the murder of George Floyd, my company had a team meeting. And I started the team meeting in the first time I'd ever been truly hopeless. And I said, I don't know if I can run this company in the US. I think that in order to honor my family, we have to come back to Europe. Now, Neil Barry, my co-founder, a white guy, said, no, Jonathan, we don't run from this. We're going to do what we do better than anybody else, and we are going to write stories that will change the narrative of black and brown people the world over. How are we going to do that, Neil? Well, let's publish a book that celebrates black and brown excellence in business. But these will be different stories. These will be stories that have not yet been told by black and brown executives who didn't use sport or entertainment and media as their platform to become successful entrepreneurs. He said, furthermore, Jonathan, we'll publish this book as a non-profit initiative, and then we'll distribute this book across every single high school in the UK to start with. In my darkest moment about turning my back on the United States of America, my co-founder gave me a flashlight. He lit me up from the inside with this idea. And I said to him, brilliant, we'll call it A Colourful View from the Top. Now, who are we going to find to feature? How are we going to start the process of curating this book? Now, I am so proud of this book. Thank you, Steph. I am so proud of this book because it is unlike any other collection of professional stories. And the reason why it's unlike any other collection of professional stories is I wanted this to not read like the polished resume or somebody's LinkedIn profile. I wanted this to be the story of from cradle to pinnacle. I wanted it to be raw. I wanted it to be gritty. I wanted it to be unsettling. But at all times, I wanted it to be inspirational and empowering for the young readers who we're targeting with this book through the free distribution at all high schools. Now, in order for me to set the tone as we reached out to different black and brown executives, I knew that I had to write an opening chapter about my life that was as authentic as I'd ever told it. So in order for you to appreciate the tone, I'd like to just read part of the opening chapter that I wrote. Actually, I'm just going to get some water as well. Okay, here goes. During the 1960s, my mum had 5 sons to 3 different men. My beautiful mum is white. My 2 elder brothers are white. My 2 younger brothers are white. Born in 1967, I'm the child of a brief encounter my mum had with my Nigerian father. So not only did I grow up the only black person in my household, but I also grew up on a predominantly white, poverty-stricken council estate in Leeds. As a child, I faced abuse in different parts of my life, sometimes at home, occasionally in the classroom, often in the streets, and always in the playground. It was awful. That said, I don't blame anybody specifically. Racism was, indeed still is, a huge part of British culture. The late 60s and 70s was an era when Britain genuinely was struggling to come to terms with mass immigration from places like India, Pakistan, the Caribbean, and West Africa. The racism these black and brown communities experienced was brutal. There was a large and growing population of hardcore racists with policies based on the idea of keeping Britain white. The highest profile group at the time was the National Front Party. Founded the year that I was born, in 1967, it reached the height of its electoral support during the mid-1970s, when it was the UK's 4th largest party in terms of share of votes. The National Front was very active in Leeds. I remember being given National Front flyers too many times whilst being spat on by angry, hateful National Front supporters as I left middle school. The leaflets were designed to stoke fear of or in black people. They worked. Every time I was left a terrified little boy. One flyer I remember showed the illustration of 2 human brains side by side. One was supposedly the brain of a white man, the other the brain of a black man. The white man's brain was some 20% larger. The headline read, "Proof, black men are stupid. They have smaller brains." I kept a bunch of those leaflets hidden out of sight from my brothers and my mum. I guess I wanted to find ways to understand if any of the claims were true, so I kept them for later study. Although extreme in their rhetoric, the National Front Party didn't occupy a niche opinion. Surveys conducted in the mid-1960s revealed that 4 out of 5 British people felt that too many immigrants had been let into the country. The British media played a role too. Broadly speaking, this was a time when black communities were communities to either fear or ridicule. Take British TV, for example. Each weekend, I would sit with my white family and oddly laugh at the portrayal of black people on shows like The Black and White Minstrel Show or sitcoms like Love Thy Neighbour. Imagine the discomfort of being the only black child in a room when your entire white family is laughing about the black people you saw on TV. The pain was made worse for me by knowing that these shows and others would generate a fresh batch of racial abuse that I would have to endure at school, as I was the only black kid in my entire year. Although I loved school, I never liked Mondays. In short, I hated being black because I hated being the target of hate speech, ignorant humour, or physical abuse. For me, all of these media portrayals of minorities not only affected how other people saw me, but also how I saw myself. Was I a joke? Was I somebody to be frightened of? Was I less intelligent than everybody else in my class? For a time, I really didn't know the right answers to these important questions. Honestly, before puberty, I would have given anything to be the same colour as everybody else in my family. So, this draft chapter set the tone for our executive reach out to the black and brown community. And I am so proud that everybody that we reached out to, including our very own Imran, founder and chief executive of Business of Fashion, agreed to be in this book and agreed to tell their story with a level of honesty, authenticity, and reality that I don't think has ever been told before. And one of the greatest privileges of my career was working with all of these execs to shape their story so that the stories are unique, the stories are distinct, but there is a common tone within this book. Now, as I was thinking about all of the leadership traits that are showcased in this book, and by the way, in everybody's welcome bag, goodie bag, however you describe it, there is a free copy of this book for you. A lot of you will think that you know Imran. A lot of you will know why you respect him, but you can't possibly understand how far he's come without reading this story. It's one of the most inspirational stories in the book, and I encourage you all to read it before you say goodbye to him, because your goodbyes will just be so much more purposeful if you really understand his story. So as I was looking at all of these stories, I was trying to see if there was a pattern of leadership that has previously not been told. Now, yes, of course, they all have resilience. They all work incredibly hard. They've all got a huge vision. None of them understand the concept of no. But there was something else that I uncovered in each one of the stories. The first is that every single one of these leaders in this book had a huge, shameful relationship with something. They were either shamed because of their ethnicity, shamed because of their culture, shamed because of their sexual identity, shamed because of their poverty, shamed because of their lack of education. But you know what? Each and every one of these leaders turned shame into an asset. And each and every one of these leaders now serves the very concept that they were shamed about. Taking shame and turning shame into a badge of honor is the first thing that each of these leaders have in common. Secondly, they all embrace vulnerability. Probably because they are literally charting the wild frontier. They're not following in anybody else's footsteps, that's for sure. That they have a comfort in reaching out for help. I can't do this. I need help. Will you coach me? Will you mentor me? So they're slaying shame and they're embracing vulnerability. What's the net output of that? And you'll see this when you read these stories. Authenticity. These leaders show up with a level of authenticity that I believe is quite unprecedented. Now, the interesting thing in culture and society today, when we're worried about misinformation, when we're worried about deep fakes, when we're worried about, political rhetoric, that authenticity seems to be a scarce concept. And yet all of these leaders are showing up in a very, very authentic way. Just this week, Merriam-Webster's declared the word authentic as this year's word of the year, because more people have been searching for language that is the antidote to all the media and political rhetoric that we're exposed to. So what does authenticity in leadership look like? The first truth is that authentic leaders show up as their full selves. And what happens when you have a leader showing up as your full self is that you end up inspiring your team around you to show up as their full self. And what you get when that happens is you start to get deeper connections in the workplace that are based on empathy, that are based on compassion, that are based on truth. The third phenomenal factor is that authentic leaders tend to make decisions in a much more consistent way, because they're not necessarily concerned about the political agenda in an organization. And so their teams can start to recognize decision-making patterns, which makes the organization that much more effective and that much more efficient. And then the final truth about authenticity in leadership is that these leaders do not care about being judged by others. And I think that seeing Brunello's conversation yesterday one of the most authentic business leaders that I've ever had the pleasure of listening to. You just know he's got his vision, he's got his principles, and he doesn't care what anybody says negative about him. And this is a truth about authenticity in leadership. So what does all of this mean? What is this calculation? What is this formula for leadership? So we're slaying the thing that we were shameful of. In fact, as you grow up older, you start to become in service of the thing that you were shameful of. So I grew up a closeted gay guy, and now I spend a whole load of my time and resources helping young people from LGBTQ communities find their feet and find their place and ultimately find their voice. So something that I was ashamed of, I am now in service of, which is a brilliant transition. They embrace vulnerability, ask for help, share their vulnerability, as Lena did when we had that conversation with Imran. You know, her moments of vulnerability, she counts to being some of the moments that have brought her, the new chief exec, closer to the workforce at Chanel. And this creates authenticity in leadership that is increasingly sought after by people as the world starts to create such huge amounts of distrust. And so the net impact of all of this is trust. If you show up as an authentic leader, you can create cultures in your teams, organizational wide, that is fundamentally based on trust. And this is really important because you think about all of the things that are happening in the world now that we cannot trust. We cannot trust geopolitical safety. We cannot trust governments. We cannot trust technology. We cannot trust, is our company going to hit the numbers this quarter? Even if we do hit the numbers, will Wall Street react positively or negatively? All of the patterns that we used to trust seem to be breaking down. So the one thing that we must all honor is trust in ourselves and trust in each other. Because for me, as a dad, I need to ensure that the trust that my babies inherently give my husband and I is honored. And I'm using this as a symbol. Think about your teams. Your teams are all giving you trust that you're going to show up in a way that is beneficial to them, that you're going to make decisions today on some of these big, hairy, complex issues like sustainability, like climate crisis, like the embracing of AI and other technologies. You're going to make these decisions that are going to impact whether their future, when they become the leaders in your organization and you're no longer working, when our children become the workforce, they're all going to either benefit or otherwise from the decisions that we all make today. And I would just encourage all of you as leaders to ensure that all the decisions that you make are designed to make sure that the next generation of leaders and our children, who are after all our future, have a much better experience on this planet than we did. Thank you.
It's over. Thank you, Jonathan. That is actually the perfect note to end on. Before I say my farewells, let's have a quick look back at the last 3 days and the 5 sessions of BOF Voices 2023.
Dear Earthlings, why are we so suddenly freaked out though now?
Geopolitics, the issues we're seeing across the world.
Increased tribalism, increased polarization are back in fashion.
What happens to the years, the decades of damage that has been done to our environment?
Unfortunately, the world is not going into any better place.
You have one of the most beautiful planets, and it can still be saved.
The best way to learn is to do.
Every day there's something new to learn. I'm going to learn the hell out of everything.
It knows, and it's alive. It's coming, it's here.
By 2029, the smartest being on Earth is not going to be human.
We always
hear people talking about. We want to get the promise of AI and not the peril of AI.
So this is why human beings will gain from it, because AI will be just a partner for us.
There are aspects of the creative process that cannot be taken away by the machine.
Sometimes we need to use technology to support the craft, but it cannot come all from the machine.
We have to commit to use AI not just to innovate, but to inspire.
We are at a cusp where technology is speeding up.
We didn't get here overnight, and we're not going to get to where we want to overnight. But we have extraordinary people.
That I think it's so important to be just kind to each other. I mean, we are human beings for a reason because we have humanity.
It's shared purpose, shared passion, a shared vision for the future.
We're all here because we care about the future.
Because when you go out on a limb and it succeeds, you'll never not have that.
From a little bit of acceptance, from a show of unconditional love, we can all gain something from this fight.
I want to make the world a place where diversity is celebrated and where what stands out is more important than what fits in.
You point a new tool at empty space, and what you discover is everything.
So first, I just want to thank our speakers. What an incredible cohort of speakers this year. I think this was the best group ever. Thank you. I've been trying to connect it all in my head, and it's a bit hard. I'm sure it's the same for all of you. But the thing that always I find so remarkable at Voices at this point, people sometimes ask me, people who haven't been here before, they're like, what's the theme? And I always say, we don't have a theme. The theme emerges. The theme comes at the end. There's no construct at the beginning saying, this is what it's about. When you take people who are shaping the zeitgeist in whatever way they shape the zeitgeist, and you bring them together in a single space, they just happen to be thinking about the same things. They just happen to use the words belonging, vulnerability, colonialism, or decolonization. They happen to be thinking about the world in ways, they happen to be thinking about the world in ways that how they can make it better. And if we take the combination of all of the things that everyone has said here this past couple of days, I'm sure it's going to be the kind of information, the kind of wisdom, the kind of guidance that we're all going to need as we look at this year coming ahead, because it's going to be a doozy. I remember Asa here saying 2 billion people will be voting next year. And we're not going to know what's true. So as we kind of reflect on everything that's happened, I just want to make sure that you all leave with enough inspiration and guidance and courage and bravery to face whatever is coming, because, we can do it. Voices, as you know, is a huge amount of work, and it's the result of so many people. Stephanie on our team told me today, she said there's 200 people working on site. There's only 180 of you, by the way. And so we just want to thank some of those people and organizations that made it possible. We can't do this event without our partners. So I want to start by thanking Snap and McKinsey and Porsche and Amazon Fashion and Ariane and The Invisible Collection and Pandora and Discarded and Base and EcoElf. This is a very big undertaking for us as a company. And really, the only way to make it happen is with our partners. So please join me in thanking the partners. I also want to thank Getty Images, the Soho House team here on site, who's always taking good care of us, our production company, Vivid, and the group at Picnic, who will be who have been here for 8 years, actually, working with us on the gala for later tonight, so you'll see that. I want to thank all of you, our Voices community. It fills me with immense pride when people come up to me and they're like, it's my 5th Voices. It's my 7th Voices. That's exactly what we were trying to build here. So whether you're online or you're here in the room, thank you for joining us and being part of the conversations we've had here. This felt like the world in one place. We traveled to every continent. We heard from so many different types of people. It's just such an amazing opportunity to just get that feeling of what's happening. So thanks to all of the people that were here from everywhere. So much of what happens at Voices happens off the stage, and I know you're each going to walk away with new relationships and new learnings. And so it only happens because you all came. So I hope you'll come back. And finally, I want to thank the BOF team. I see you're all in the corners there. Why don't you all come on stage? Come on. Yeah. I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky. Jonathan was talking about teams and how to build great teams. And this is a team that's really enabled me to be my full and authentic self at work. And I'm so grateful for that. I know I'm very exacting sometimes. But I hope you all know it's so worth it, because this community, they appreciate you. I appreciate you. Thank you for everything. And that's all. Except there's still some activities tonight. I'm going to say goodbye to everyone watching all around the world. We look forward to seeing you again in the coming weeks in all the different ways we connect with our community around the world. But for now, it's au revoir from Voices 2023. Bye-bye.